Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Monday night edition of The People Show. I'm Mark Wallace, your host and facilitator for this Monday night edition of The People Show on intellectualradio.com, iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And thank you for tuning in to the broadcast. We're going to be talking about some very important things. I hope that each week we have conversation about important things that matter to your life, to all of our lives, and that at the end of the conversation that we're all moved just a little bit more to get ourselves engaged so that we can address and change the conditions. We are the change that we are looking for. You and I are the change that we are looking for. Tonight, I have guests coming up later on in the broadcast. We're going to be talking with Hip Hop DetoxX founder and CEO, Brother Enoch Muhammad. We're going to be talking with him, reflecting on the Million Man March that took place on October the 16th, 1995. I was there for that event and for that historic event and his third annual Males to Men seminar at the Chicago State University on the 30th anniversary of the Million Man March. He's going to be with me, and we're going to be talking about that, and of course, how we can move forth and being encouragers to each other and being encouragers to young men, elevating them and preparing them to be productive leaders throughout the diaspora of our community. So we'll talk about that with him and the events that he has scheduled coming up at the Chicago State University. So that's going to be a program on the program a little bit later on. And we're also going to be talking with Lauren Ashley Simmons, who is a Texas Democratic state representative who is here in Illinois to break the quorum from the Texas Republican House Republicans that are trying to gerrymander the congressional districts in redistricting in the middle of the period. Redistricting is not for another 5 or 6 years. It's supposed to be every 10 years that you redraw the maps. And at the behest of the thug in chief, Donald Trump, the governor is acquiescing and directing the legislature to redraw the map. And they want to redraw the map so that they can take 5 seats and literally steal the election. They're doing it with all of the lights on, in the wide open, rigging the election. Everything that he falsely accused the Democratic Party and Democrats and everybody else who didn't agree with him of doing, he's actually literally doing it, saying it out loud with the lights on, telling the Republicans in Texas through the governor to redraw the map so that they can take control of 5 seats to try and ensure themselves a victory in 2026. This is far more than Texas. These are national implications. And we're going to talk about it with the Texas State Representative Lauren Ashley Simmons is going to join us later on in the program. So make sure that you stay tuned in for that. And I would ask that you would share with your other outlets. Please make sure you go to our YouTube page at Mark J. Wallace, The People's Show, and register there. We want to certainly get our listeners and our viewers up. Our goal is to get to 100,000 and then continue to grow. So, but we got a long, long way to go to get there. And the idea is not for the purposes of fame or fortune. It is for the purposes of impacting public policy addressing the concerns of our communities here in the Chicagoland area, in Cook County, and in the state of Illinois. And thusly, we will be able to encourage others around the country on what it really takes to be engaged in the process in order to address critical needs in our communities. There are several things that are happening. The White House is directing this Attorney General to open up a bogus investigation on Jack Smith, the special prosecutor that was appointed by Merrick Garland to investigate the January 6th insurrection. And Donald Trump was brought up on federal charges. And of course, those federal charges went away because he got elected to the presidency of the United States. And now he is continuing to erode and to destroy the democratic norms of what has been worked on for the past 80 years to get us to the point to where we were, nothing being perfect, nothing being absolute, but far better than it has been in the past. And we were making strides, in particular in the past administration, in the Biden administration, that made transformational legislative gains that would have transformed many millions of people's lives for decades to come, all being destroyed in every attempt to destroy by this administration to erase any of that progress purely because of their whiteness that they want to protect or preserve or to empower themselves not to become the minority in the country. I hear the term complicit being thrown around a lot by people saying that the Republican legislators in the Senate and in the House are being complicit. They are not being complicit. They are in collaboration. They have finally got their boy at the top of the political food chain to exemplify everything that they believe in their heart of hearts, that they didn't have the courage or the guts to act on, but he does it with the lights on because he has no shame. He's a sociopath and he has absolutely no regard for anybody else. So, and he is acting out what millions of people in this country who have never participated in the political process have come out of the woodworks to support because they have their man. And that there are people with suits and ties and even some dresses in Congress that are in collaboration. They're in agreement with. So they're not capitulating. They're in absolutely agreement with what they see going on. Don't be distracted. Don't be dissuaded. Don't be confused. Now, there are people who don't agree with that. But if you have a conscience and character and the courage and the conviction that what you see is not right, then you will stand up to it and you will speak out about it. I think these votes where you have two Republicans voting against some measure, I think it's all a dog and pony show. They can have two people to vote against it to give some sort of symbolism or implication that they are somebody who has the wherewithal to stand up to it. But if you notice, they only get the two. So only getting the two is like having none. It makes no difference. And you don't hear anybody talking about primarying them, because that was negotiated before the vote even took place. On the most controversial people like Emile Beauvais, that just got confirmed to serve on the federal bench or the federal appellate bench, and probably will be nominated for the Supreme Court. Should Clarence Thomas decide to retire, or Samuel Alito decide to retire, that's probably who Trump will give the nod to be nominated to go to the Supreme Court. So we're going to be talking about all of this. Now, I want to talk about some things here locally that's taking place, or at least being considered. We didn't talk about it last week, but of course they are trying to come up with a plan to extend Grant Park. They want to extend Grant Park out to the lakefront, so where DuSable Drive goes from Roosevelt Road all the way down to Randolph. They want to extend Grant Park over to the lakefront, and they're talking about taking DuSable Lake Drive underground. And when I read the story about that, I thought that is exactly what they should have done with Cornell Avenue when they shut it down, or when they were talking about putting the monstrosity of the Obama Center where it is and closing down Cornell Drive. It's simple math. They could have taken Cornell Drive right underground without destroying the drive or changing its course, and they still could have developed it. So, but they're trying to figure out whether or not they can get the money so that they can make it happen. So that's into talks now, and we'll see where that goes. Also, I'm going to continue to talk about what's happening at the Board of Review. I want for you to be informed and educated about what is happening at the Board of Review. The Board of Review is the quasi-appellate agency where property owners can appeal to the Board of Review to have their taxes reduced. Largely, commercial property owners benefit from the Board of Review because they own Larry Rogers Jr. and they own George Cardenas. There's only 3 commissioners at the Board of Review: Larry Rogers Jr., George Cardenas, and Samantha Steele. Samantha Steele has no power because she doesn't have an ally, and it's just her. She can speak against certain decisions that are being made and show her dissent that way. But she doesn't have any voting power because there's only 3 commissioners: Larry Rogers Jr. and George Cardenas. Larry Rogers Jr. has been a commissioner since, I believe it was 1994, and they have given and shifted billions of dollars of taxes from wealthy commercial property owners downtown and have given them huge reductions and shifted billions of dollars of their taxes onto homeowners in the district. And Larry Rogers Jr.'s district is District 3, which is all of the south side and south suburbs out to the state lines. And what that means is that whenever they give tax reductions to property owners, those tax reductions get spread out over the homeowners, and the homeowners have to pay those taxes on behalf of the wealthy property owners downtown. So the wealthy property owners downtown get the luxury of reduced valuation so that they pay reduced taxes, but they get the equity when they go to sell the property. They get the full value and valuations of the property, and you and I subsidize their taxes for as long as they own the property and as long as Larry Rogers Jr. and George Cardenas votes to give them what they pay them for. And when I say pay them, that means that they contribute to their campaigns heavily. Larry Rogers Jr.'s campaign is almost $1 million from the tax appeal attorneys. Not only do they pad his political coffers, they also pad his private interest of his law firm by referring him these cases that are in some cases multi-million-dollar settlements that they refer to Larry Rogers Jr. So there is a rigged racket as well, and we cannot not talk about it or get so consumed by other things that we are forgetting and not paying attention to what is happening locally here in Chicago and Cook County. And we have some bad Democrats, just like there are bad Republicans. We have some bad Democrats, and we have some Democrats that are doing harm to our communities. And when we have people who are doing harm to our communities, we, the people, must act, and we have to change, and we should not and cannot allow for people who are doing harm to our community to stay in positions of power to continue to inflict that harm upon our people. And Larry Rogers Jr. has gotten away with it for more than 30 years. Well, that has got to come to a stop, because we are no longer ignorant to what Larry Rogers Jr. is doing and has been doing, along with his cohort, George Cardenas. So I want to make sure that we empower ourselves with information, factual data, information, so that we are empowered to take the necessary steps. So you have to pass that information on. And certainly you want to make sure that the people that you that are in your circles, that information is shared with, because this is critical to our communities. Think about this: billions of dollars taking out of our community, that those dollars could have been used to improve the infrastructure in our communities, could have been used to improve our roads, but could have been used to improve our homes, send children to college, pay for health insurance, much needed health insurance, So there's a number of residuals in the negatives that happens as a result of this. But we must not be ignorant to what is happening. And we must not be so personality driven or relational or relationship driven. We must be transactional. We must be transactional. And what does that mean? Transactional means that we support and put people in place that are going to deliver for our communities. If they don't deliver, then we have to remove them and put somebody else there to deliver. That's transactional. Relationship is, I support you regardless of what you do because we are quote unquote friends. Well, I don't know a single living, active person in office outside of the assessor's office that I can say that I have any satisfaction in their productivity. The fact that we have all these people in public office and our communities are lagging and being harmed by policies says a couple of things. One, that we are out of touch and we have not understood the gravity of our being disorganized. And two, we have people who look like us, but are not living like us or legislating like us. They are legislating to some preferential check writer, to the person who has the wherewithal to write the right sums of dollars and checks to their campaign coffers. We have to break that cycle. We have to break that cycle. And the way that you have to break that cycle is you've got to fall out of love with any person in public office. You've got to just drop them. You got to fall out of love with them. And love our communities. Love what's in the best interest of our communities. When you have these people who are running around trying to celebritize themselves as public officials, and they are running for a public office, because these are public office, meaning you. It's your office. You're the public. And they're running, or they want your office. But when they get into your office, it becomes their property. And you become secondary. That's not the way that it was set up to be. That's the way that it has evolved to be, but that's not the way that it's set up to be. And we can change it. Doesn't mean that it couldn't be changed. We can absolutely change it. But in order for us to change it, we must change. We must change our belief system. We must change our apathetic attitude. We have to become much more engaged in the process, and you have to believe that by you engaging in the process, that you can make a difference. And you can make a difference. And whether you know it or not, you do make a difference, especially when you go to the polls. You cast ballots and you vote people into office. And you have to ask yourself the question, I voted to support these people. They got elected. What has changed for the positive overall in our communities from the people that you have elected that's been in office? That's a very easy question, is to look at our communities and see by measure the significance of growth or the insignificant of growth or the stagnation. Because you don't send a person to public office to come back to tell you that we couldn't get this done or I can't get that done. If somebody uses I couldn't or I can't, that's not somebody that we need to have into that office, because that means they just don't know how to fight. They don't know how to be strategic, or they're not willing to be, or they have been compromised, or all of the above. Either way, it's a negative for us. It's a negative for our communities. And when I say for us, I'm talking about for people who really need the government to step in to create possibilities. That's what you're there for. You are not there to be servants for the preferential few. You're there to be a servant for the people who need help the most. That's what government is for. Government is not to be there to be the paraclete for the wealthy. That's not what government's responsibility. Government's responsibility is to take care of those and to aid those who cannot take care of themselves. That's what government is about. So I'm going to put up the call-in number, and you all will be able to call in a little bit later on. I was just going through some numbers for the state of Illinois, state of Florida, and the state of Texas. And I'm going to be talking with State Representative Simmons a little bit later on about what's happening down in Texas. But I started doing a little bit of research and looking at what the ethnic maps look like in Florida, Illinois, and Texas. There are other states, but these are the states that I looked at and wanted to make some sort of analogy. In the state of Illinois, 58.3% of the population is white. 13.9% of the population is Black. 18.2% of the population is Hispanic. 5.8% is Asian. In the state of Florida, 51% of the population is white. 14.8% of the population is Black. And there are two different groups of Hispanic. There's one group that's 12.5%, one group that identify as white Hispanics are 8.53%, and then the other is 4.94%. And I looked at those two numbers. Now, here in Illinois, Blacks, we are 14% of the population. Just a little less than the population percentage for the state of Florida. The difference is that we have the ability to have the power. In the state of Florida, they do not. And the reason is because they are all over the place. And where the Black community was heavily empowered at one time, it was at in Miami-Dade County. But that has been eroded because the South American and the Hispanic community has completely, overwhelmingly taken over Miami-Dade, period. And so Blacks in Miami-Dade have little power, little voice. But yet they are 14.8% of the population. Here in Illinois, we're 13.9% of the population. But guess what? We have far more power, or the ability to have power. And the reason why we do is because nobody can get elected to statewide office without having the plurality of the Black vote. Because of the way that we are situated, which is why they loved population loss, but population loss has been going on for a long time. But because of the way that we are situated in Chicago and Cook County, we have the ability to put together a strong, powerful voting bloc that we can determine any office in major metropolitan office in the state of Illinois. We can determine the governor. We can determine the mayor of the city of Chicago. We can determine alder people. We can determine the Cook County Board president. We can determine the attorney general, the state's attorney. We can determine all of those offices because of the access that we have and because of the way that we are clustered in Chicago and Cook County. More than 1.5 million registered Black voters in all of Cook County. That's including Chicago and Cook County. That's more people than they have in the United Auto Workers. They only have 400,000 active members, 580,000 retired. And that's that's the United States of America and Canada. 400,000 active all across the country and in Canada. We have 1.5 million right here that we can do great things if we allowed for ourselves, not if we allowed for ourselves, if we intentionally organized ourselves to have that kind of power. We could determine our destiny and we can determine whatever it is that we want at every level, from education to economics. We could make that determination, not in just in having the position, but having the power so that we can impact public policy to address these conditions that have been produced by neglect of decades of neglect. We, you and I, can certainly make that happen. So while we pay attention to all these other things being eroded, while we see the absolute attempt to destruct the democratic norms of a democracy by and at the behest of Donald Trump, to try and consolidate power, to be a complete authoritarianist, to completely eradicate the democratic process. That is what that effort is about. And if you don't understand it, it would be wise for you to get with someone who you trust to help you understand the significance of what has happened in the short term and in the long range. Because much of public policy decided is about the future. It starts to happen years later, couple of years later, and then you start to evaluating, to seeing what the results are from those decisions. Much of the pain, much of the disenfranchisement will come into play, and the people who put it into play are long gone. And so the damage that's being inflicted, the people who are there in power are the people who are going to be blamed. And that is because of the lack of understanding of the average person, not because people are, not intelligent, but because there's a lot of things that are going on. Most people are not paying attention to the daily nuances of the democratic process. Most people are not paying attention in keeping up with this, as someone like myself who has to do this because I have to be able to convey what is going on, understand what's going on, and convey to the public, this is what's happening and this is what we have to prepare for. But most people are not doing that. And most people don't understand the process of government. There is a process. Now, of course, that process is at a threat with the current administration that we have in place. And we're going to see the strength of the elasticity of whether or not we have the wherewithal to ward that off. All right, we're going to move a little bit further on. We're going to be talking a little bit later on. Please stay with me. Right now, we are going to move into another conversation. As I talked to you early in the program, that we are approaching the 30th anniversary of the Million Man March that took place on October the 16th, 1995. I was there. I got there at 4 o'clock in the morning. And when I got there at 4 o'clock in the morning, there were well over 50 to 100,000 men on the mall at that time. And I got into a great spot. And so now we are approaching the 30th anniversary coming this October 16th of 2025. And my next guest, Brother Enoch Muhammad, who is the founder and CEO of Hip Hop Detox, is going to share with us what they are doing on their third annual Males to Men. I want to welcome Brother Enoch Muhammad to the program. Brother Muhammad, how you doing?
I'm well. Thank you very much, Brother Mark. I truly appreciate your invitation to your show.
Well, I certainly appreciate you coming. I think that this is a vital conversation. And I think that people certainly need to understand exactly what your mission is and what you have been doing. So give us some background on Hip Hop Detox and what Hip Hop Detox is all about and when you started.
Well, being one of the co-founders, there are two founders of Hip Hop Detox, myself and Keisha Wells. And one of the realities that face us today, as it faced us over almost 20 years ago, is that we look at our children, we look at the youth and the young adults, and we wonder why we keep seeing the same systemic problems over and over and over again. We see the same thing. It's just we have a new name that we put into it, or we have a new solution that we say that will work. And we continue to have these same problems. And the bottom line is that when you put people together who say that they care and they really want to see a change, then whether they have all the resources that's needed, all the support that's needed, all the money. When we started Hip Hop Detox, the name wasn't Hip Hop Detox. Keisha was working as a substitute teacher. I'm sorry, I was a substitute teacher in Chicago Public Schools. She was working as a special education teacher in Chicago Public Schools. And the realities that she was facing in the school systems were the same realities I was facing before I even became an employee in Chicago Public Schools. I had spent some years working with young people going back into 1991, 92, when I was a teen going into my 20s, working with young people to find ways to prevent them from getting into the gang lifestyle, trying to find ways to help them to see how they can navigate away from, early pregnancies, getting in trouble with the police, et cetera. So, that was part of what I was doing just coming up. And so as we got older and we began to see more and more of these problems at younger ages, and of course, being inside Chicago Public Schools, you can't help but see what's going on. And unfortunately, when the young people begin to tell you what are some of the causes of it, that's when you have to make a decision to say, hey, we have to do something, because the regular writing, arithmetic, and all the things that we say work, it won't work if you don't have a real student in front of you. And when I say real student, it's very difficult to focus on mathematics and English and writing and all the things that we would want young people to focus on when they're focusing on survival. And they're dealing with everything from parents strung out on drugs to parents that are not at home. They don't care about being a parent. So you have all these different issues. And so we decided to start a program that was called Operation Cultivation, where we basically, over the course of a summer, we dealt with conflict resolution, cultural arts, entrepreneurship, physical and mental wellness, and we made it applicable to them holistically, meaning spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically. We wanted them to be able to learn, but to also experience the things that we were communicating with them about. So a lot of people today are talking about the food and how we're being poisoned with the food supply. And people are talking about red 40 and yellow number 5. And some of the youth that we worked with back in 2002, they remember us talking with them and going, through the whole understanding of why we don't eat certain ingredients. We don't eat certain foods because look at the red 40 that's in your Flaming Hots. Look at what's in your drink and it has yellow number 5 in it. Where does that come from? And so we made them aware of it, but then we also gave them alternatives so then they could experience the alternative. And the reality, again, that was 2002. And so we're here pretty much now, we're looking at, 20 plus years of something that should have been taught holistically all over, not only Chicago public schools, but all over the country. But now you have several decades where now people are, everything from going to the different dialysis centers, because you have young people who have been eating the wrong foods for a long period of time. So now you have 18, 19-year-olds who are now having, kidney issues, liver issues. And I'm just using this as an example when it comes to the lack of knowledge. And when you lack knowledge, you lack understanding, it becomes very difficult to modify behaviors and to change what it is that you do. And so we began doing this kind of work in 2002. And so in 2006, after doing the work over a period of time, we began looking at what it is that we could do to advance the work. And when we attended the Millions More movement, which was in 2005, and that was the 10-year anniversary at that time of the Million Man March. The call was, go back to your cities and look at what it is that you can do that would fit into one of those ministries, so then you could advance the work. Because the work is not just in the mosque, it's not just in the church, it's not just in one organization, it's all of us seeing what it is that we can do to have an impact on our people, on our neighborhoods, and make where we live into communities so they can become clean and decent places to live. And so when we returned back, we had a meeting at Carter G. Woodson Library, I believe it was in December, and we were blessed to organize 3 buses to go to the Millions More movement, which was the A. Philip Randolph bus, the Chairman Fred Hampton bus, and the D.A. Smart bus. And so when we returned back to Chicago and we said, hey, what do you all think we should focus on? Unanimously, people were like, we need to deal with the youth. We need to find ways to be able to work with them in such a way as to change their condition. And so in 2006, January to be exact, that's when we had our first official hip hop detox event or activity. And it was at a medical center over there on 71st and Jeffrey. It used to be ran by the Blue Gargoyle organization. And that's where hip hop detox officially started in 2006. And almost 20 years later, we've been blessed to be able to evolve the work so that now we're a public health 501c3 organization that has affected over 400,000 young people, ages ranges from 9 to 24. And we've been all over the country doing hip hop detox in a variety of ways, whether it's with Steve Harvey and his camp being featured about 4 times on his ranch, and then here in Chicago, working with him as a post program for his program, his empower or his mentoring program. We've always had an empowerment program for young brothers. However, we incorporated it more vividly, the mentoring part, because we always considered mentoring to be a component of empowerment, just like counseling and training and teaching and coaching. All those are elements. So with all the different variations of the work, the whole idea was to find a way to produce a holistic human development impact with young people, so then they can navigate life in a much better way, so they can achieve more productivity in life and not get caught up with incarceration and those things that lead to an early grave. So that's like a little synopsis of the journey of hip hop detox and where we started from. But it's been a journey of us individually because, like I said, Keisha, the co-founder, she was a behavior intervention specialist and a special education teacher. But even prior to that, she had a background where she was working with young people and doing things in her lifetime. So before we met, there were some things that was going on with her, just like with myself, that made it that once we came together, my background in community activism with the music industry, all those things came together, interest in herbs and those things that detoxify the body, that help out the mental condition of us as a people, as human beings. All those things came together to produce the start of what's called hip hop detox. And it's an ever evolving reality.
Well, it sounds like a very holistic. So, do you have how many young people are a part of your program?
Well, as I was saying, over the course of the last almost 20 years, we've had over 400,000 to come in our program, through our program, and then they would go forward after they, some of them would go into college, some of them would go into the workforce. So every year, and especially now, we've been doing a lot of work from a school-based perspective, where we work with the students in different schools, different school districts. And our focus over the past probably at least 4 or 5 years has accelerated when it comes to professional development and working with the adults who work with young people, because the same triggers, the same trauma that the young people have, the adults have. And so it's a whole bunch of re-triggering and re-stimulations going on, where the work that we do on one level with the students, we have to find ways to do the same work with their parents or their caretakers, along with the professionals that work with them, whether they're in a school setting, high school, middle school, whether they're in a group home, whether they're in a juvenile detention center. We have to find ways to be able to really work with at least all three of those critical groups, because the reality is that when you add up the amount of hours that's spent, whether you're in a school setting, 6 to 8 hours maybe a day, and then when you leave school, now you have X amount of hours, whether you're at home, you're in the area that you live in. You have to find ways to be able to make it where all those who are involved are getting what they need to be able to have a more balanced and productive life. So we spent more time, providing those type of services and making an effort so that all institutions that we come in contact with know that we understand that, burnout is real. It used to be where burnout would take place maybe in November going to December for a lot of educators and people who work in the school system. But these days it seems like, school starts in August on the 18th, and burnout happens on September 15th. And so now you have a overwhelmed population of faculty in schools or service providers who are already experiencing burnout because of the overwhelming feeling they get when they're in these different environments with students who themselves are going through a variety of issues internally, and those things that they're dealing with where they live. It comes into the school. So now we have to find ways to balance all this out while they're trying to learn, or they're trying to gain some level of balance if they live in a foster a group home or something like that.
So do you have 400,000 youth? That's a lot of people. Do you have a way that you all keep track of those who would come through Hip Hop Detox and then, for lack of a better word, excel to their careers or trades or some other area that they move on to? Are you all able to track those people that Hip Hop Detox has been, that sort of conveyor belt for them, and certainly that center, I call it the center of support for them to get the kinds of guidance and get focused on making those positive moves?
Well, quite a few of them we find ways to communicate with just with social media. And of course, a lot of times we either run into them or they'll communicate with us and call us, or we'll have a parent or a family member that may even call us and communicate with us. So it's been over the years, there's been a variety of ways that we've been in contact with those who have been part of our program. I think because we're coming up on 20-year anniversary, we look to be able to communicate with many more next year or leading up to next year, because with a 20-year anniversary coming up, the youth that were part of our program before we were Hip Hop Detox, some of them we already began discussing, us having some type of reunion activities, or us coming together to kind of catch up and to capture their feedback and their testimonials. So some have already done that in different ways. And so when it comes to a lot of the tracking early on, we started working with organizations like Chicago Community Trust and Springboard Foundation. And so they put in place different things that, when we work with them, so that we could have our tracking done. And once I think back in 2011 and 12, when we were at about 231,000 young people, and mind you, because we have different formats, we've had young people to be part of assembly, where we may come into their school and do an assembly. And that youth empowerment assembly or session would have 500, 1,000, students in that assembly. And then we would have some that would be part of programs, where the program may be 12 weeks or 20 weeks. If it was a summer program, it might be a 6 to 8 week program. So we had a lot of different types of formats of programs that we've done over the years. So some young people, they remember us by Hip Hop Detox, and of course, because of the videos and the pictures and social media, a lot of that over the years is actually still on those platforms. So we hope to have the type of impact next year where a lot of those that we have impacted over the years have an opportunity to kind of speak out and give their testimonials and their feedback. So then we can kind of aggregate it and have it where we can utilize it for a variety of purposes.
All right, let's talk about your 20-year anniversary. You're coming up on your third annual Males to Men seminar at Chicago State University. Talk to me about that.
Well, it's the third year, as you just said, and when we started doing the Males to Men seminar, we initially started over on 621 East 67th Street, which is where the Let's Eat to Live restaurant is, and the Salam Community Wellness Center. So we were blessed to be able to have that entire area. We utilized the back of the area of the restaurant and the wellness center, and we used the inside. Yes, Brother Akbar. And we thank him and Dr. Shabazz and Sister Carmela for allowing us to be able to have the facility to be able to do the first one over there in 2023. So we had 114 students that particular year, and we were able to have many workshops that covered everything from AI and blockchain technology to urban gardening, self-regulation class that dealt with heart-focused breathing and how to manage your anxiety and your stress. We had boxing, and we had a lot of different men from different types of organizations and backgrounds, whether they were from the lodge, the church, the mosque, brothers that just come from different organizations that just wanted to help. Some brothers just say, hey, I don't represent an organization. I see the need for this. So we had the blending of men with the spirit of the Million Man March being demonstrated. It wasn't a historical trip down memory lane. It was an active process where as soon as the young people got off the bus, they were being greeted, with the Hip Hop Detox handshake from the time they got off the bus to the time they entered the building to the time they went through the back to get to the tents. They were being greeted by each man. And so the looks on the faces of the young brothers, you could just look and see how they were tremendously impacted, because oftentimes we don't greet one another in a brotherly way. We don't look at each other in a brotherly way. And we most definitely a lot of times don't talk to each other in a brotherly way. So to see the Million Man March being demonstrated showed us that that's the biggest thing that needs to happen, is that we just can't talk about what happened 30 years ago. We have to demonstrate it. And so that led to us last year doing it at Chicago State University, and we had 240 young people to participate. And again, that same spirit, that same energy was present with the 240. We added chess to what we were doing, so the young brothers would get a chance to learn how to play chess. And the one thing about the different activities, we wanted to make sure, and I give credit to Keisha for coming up with the theme that we can't just rise up, because that's an important part of what we're doing, the rise up, but to sustain the rise up where we follow up and follow through is critical, because in truth, a lot of what happened after the Million Man March was marginalized and minimized and cut out of public discourse, because there were quite a few things that were followed up and followed through on, but it wasn't reported in the media. The media spent time sensationalizing how many people attended the march, who said it was 400,000, who said it was 800,000, so they spent a lot of time marginalizing or attempting to marginalize. And then when the Honorable Brother Minister Louis Farrakhan took the time to go to different countries to take the message of the Million Man March to those different countries, because there were so many people around the world who watched the Million Man March through C-SPAN and CNN and other news outlets, that, again, the media and those who made decisions to say, hey, we're not going to focus on the fact that 1.2 million black men registered to vote, and they were very impactful on the following election. They didn't want to focus on that. They didn't want to focus on the thousands of children that black men adopted, which was a call made during the Million Man March for black men to adopt black children. They didn't want to focus on that.
Yes.
They didn't even want to focus on the fact that there was some that said that it was a love fest and that this wasn't tied to public policy. However, when the agenda came out from the Million Man March with the legislation and the policies, and then there was a political convention of the oppressed held in St. Louis in 1997, which I and other students from Chicago, from Southern Illinois University, we went to the political convention of the oppressed. And so again, there were so many things that were not communicated. We decided, well, that theme, rise up, and follow through, gives us an opportunity to do those things. And just like it was in 1995, we're doing it against all odds, meaning that, no, we're not funded by a corporation that's, that sees that we have a budget to put this event together and to make sure that we have the follow up and follow through necessary so we can continue having these services delivered after October 16th. Because to get young people acquainted with flying drones, for example, and we thank the Chicago chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen, because they've come every year to teach young people how to pilot drones. What does it take to get your certification? Because if you're the age of 16, you can get your certification to fly drones. Well, October 16th is a starting point. It's a launching pad. After October 16th, we had to go back into the schools and follow up and follow through, which we were blessed to do in quite a few schools last school year. And we were able to go back into the schools, continue the empowerment work, continue the trauma-informed social emotional learning work, which was preparatory so that those who come behind us would be able to work more with the students on skill sets rather than behavioral issues. So right. We wanted to make sure that this year, the goal was, let's continue that, but let's expand it. So that way we're affecting 1,000+ young teens, and majority of the teens, probably over 500, we wanted to make sure our juniors and seniors, so then they could see clear pathways to college or to trades. So they could see that, hey, whether you want to get into STEM or STEAM related trades, whether you're looking at, computer science and technology and robotics and AI, or you're looking at carpentry and plumbing and HVAC and those things that we still have a need for, or if you want to go to college where you're seeing other options that way, we wanted to make sure that these pathways were available for these young brothers on the 16th. But then after the 16th, they have to be able to see, hey, how can I continue forward? What's the next steps? So if I'm interested in these things, I need a segue into the trades, or I need a segue into whatever collegiate pathway, whether I'm a junior or a senior, so then I can have a roadmap by which to keep going. And that goes for all the other activities, whether we're talking about the drones or the blockchain technology, or even the boxing and martial arts and the yoga and those things that men will be instructing them on October 16th. We want to be able to follow up and follow through, so then the schools can see not only the impact of this on their students, but the parents can see the impact, and hopefully we'll be able to have an impact on both the parents and the professionals, so then we all can be part of that process of development. Because again, we have a traumatized people. So we have to make sure that we find ways to do this. So that's why this year, we want to educate people on the fact that politically speaking, I believe it was, correct me if you know if it was a different alderman that took the stand, but I believe it was Alderman Burnett and Alderman Shaw back in 1995 that did the proclamation regarding the Million Man March, and the mayor at the time, Richard Daley, he signed off on it. And so we do have a copy of that proclamation that looks at the Million Man March and the Day of Atonement as a divinity day in the city of Chicago. And so that means that those who want to observe it as such, you have the wherewithal to be able to take off that day. because you can use it as a religious observance, regardless of what religion you affix yourself to by name or title. And so Chicago Public Schools also have a policy that says that students have 5 days that they can take as a mental health day. So that means that churches and organizations and all those who help young people and families, they can utilize this day for these purposes. So we're looking to get the young men to come from the schools, because those who go to school on that day, we want them to be able to use it as a field trip to come to Chicago State. But we're going to have some slots available for those who say, hey, I'm not going to school and I'm not coming with my school, but I want to participate on October 16th. We're going to have some slots available for them so that those young men can be part of this. But we really want to encourage the community, our people, just to see that, look, this is an opportunity for us to use the Day of Atonement, the Day of Reconciliation, responsibility. It's a day of service. It's a mental health day. If we use it in a holistic way, it could be, again, a launching pad for a series of activities that need to go on that would help bring some balance to a very imbalanced state and condition that we see going on with our young people along with their parents.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the event is going to take place at Chicago State, starting at what time to what time?
We have the Emil and Patricia Jones Convocation Center at Chicago State University. So it will, at 9 a.m., we are asking the students and the schools to come at 9 a.m. so they can get registered, get their name tags, etc. And so arrival time is 9. And then we look to end where they're getting back on the buses, going back to their schools, etc. At 2 p.m. And so that particular part of the activity, that's the daytime activities. But we also have a benefit that's going to be that evening, which is the Hip Hop Detox Live benefit, where that particular activity or production is a fusion of a concert, open mic, a variety show, but it's all put together to be able to deliver the messages and the themes, but we do it utilizing the arts. And so we have comedians, we have singers, we have dancers, we have rappers and poets, and all different types of persons that come together for a hip hop detox production. And so we're doing it as a benefit, so that way we can raise money up. So as you were speaking about the political climate right now, whether we're talking about from the president to the governor to the mayor, we look to be able to have the public and our people to see the value of what we're doing, so then we can have funding that comes from the people and not just rely on what the politicians do or don't do. Of course, they should help. They should help, because we need a minimum of $1 million just to do the whole programming for a full year, where we have 300 men to work with 1,000 young people consistently for 12 months. And then to have the programming of all the different activities to come on a consistent basis in those schools, we know that that's a minimum that we need. So instead of waiting for a grant or waiting for a politician to say, hey, we're going to give you this or do that, we're looking to move forward and just go to the people and do what we need to do on that end. However, we are going to extend the outreach to those political persons to give them an opportunity to assist, to help, to invest, and to bring on more persons of means, so then we can see the demonstration of what we're talking about. Because again, we've done it. As far as the seminars are concerned, over the past 2 years, going on 3, but over the past 20 years, we've had to do a lot of work as an organization, as an entity, without a lot of help from those from the political sphere. So, we have that mindset that, we want to expand, we want to get the support. However, we know that, from just our practical experience, we can't wait for a lot of them, because unfortunately, if we did, we wouldn't get any work done.
All right, Brother Enoch, Enoch Muhammad, who is the co-founder and CEO of Hip Hop Detox. The event is October the 16th. We're going to bring you back again because we need to make sure that we do all that we can to get the information out and get people to be in support of this great work that you're doing. I want to thank you very much for coming on the program, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Oh, I truly appreciate it. And before I forget to say this, for those who watch the program, if you want to assist, you can go to our website, which is www.hiphopdetox.org. That's DetoxX, hiphopdetox.org. And you can call our hotline number if you want to text or get information directly. You can reach us at 773-563-4315. That's 773-563-4315. And once again, thank you very much for your invitation to be on your show.
Brother Enoch, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Peace and love.
All right, folks, we are going to move right along. Of course, you all have heard about what is going on in the state of Texas. And as I said to you early on in the program, that what's happening in the state of Texas is not just about Texas. This is about a national effort that this administration, that they are trying to roll the clock back, and they are trying to essentially choose who their voters are, and to take dominant control of the of Congress by redrawing the maps and doing them in such a unfair, unequitable way in Texas. And I have the pleasure of talking to one of the Texas state representatives who is here with us now to join us. State Representative Lauren Ashley Simmons, thank you very much for joining the program.
Thank you so much for having me on, Mark. I appreciate it. And I want to apologize. I'm sorry that I'm on my phone and mobile, but when you have to pack up and leave quickly, you got to take the essentials. And so I really appreciate your flexibility in sharing what's going on in Texas.
Well, absolutely. And I appreciate you making the time here. I know that you are basically drinking from a fire hose with everything that is going on. And certainly we appreciate you coming on to talk with our audience about what's happening there. So can you share with our audience just what's happening in Texas and why it is that I'm not sure how many of you are here in Chicago, but why this move had to be made?
Yeah, so just to put it pretty simply, Donald Trump, who is the king of the Republicans and operates very much in a tyrannical fashion, gave orders to our governor that he needed 5 Republican congressional seats. And our our Republican governor, Greg Abbott, is going to bend the knee and pledge his fealty as he's done many times before. And he, decided that, yes, I will make sure that we do that for you and get you those seats. And so, and just a little background. So our legislature in Texas only meets on a biennium for 140 days. So we just got done with the session. June 2nd was signing down. That was our last day there. We had been kind of hearing whispers in the wind that we may have a special session, and the governor can call a special session for any number of reasons. It's typically is limited in scope, and it's 30 days per session. And so, the initial call did not include redistricting, and then redistricting was added. But we knew that once Trump had given this order, that was likely what we were going to be faced with dealing. And so, as it stands, the Democrats in the Texas House are currently in the minority. It's 62 Democrats in the House. And that's out of a legislature of 150 people. And so, our tools in a lot of ways to kind of prevent some of these really bad things are limited. And so this was one of those moments where we had to take a really drastic action to ensure that our communities and our people were safe. And so, kind of with that, this was the option that we had in front of us. We decided that it was necessary for us to break quorum and to operate and to conduct business on the House side. You need at least 100 members. And so we decided that it was best for us to leave the state to ensure that these maps were not rammed through and essentially, silencing the voices of communities that are already marginalized. And so that's why we're here with y'all in Chicago. There are, many of us in a few different places, but the ultimate goal is to deny quorum and ensure that Donald Trump is not running all over the Texas as he's done with so many other states and throughout the country.
Now, and of course, the House did convene today, and because there was not a quorum, of course, they had to adjourn. And I would imagine they tried to, or they did that for reasons to try to make the Democratic representatives look bad, or to suggest that the Democratic state reps were not interested in legislating on other important issues, which I think all of us know that was, not where they were. I heard some conversations by the chair who was talking about, they were talking about legislation that they had not even, presented resolutions for. So they had no interest in doing it. Now, how long do you all intend on breaking for quorum?
So I think for us, this is one of those things that we're in it for the long haul. We're taking it day by day, of course, but what we know for sure is that this special session is effectively over. And we made that decision and made that call when we left the state and did not show up today. And so what you saw today was just, some theatrics, and a call on the House was put out. So now there are civil warrants out, for our arrest, and that's, that's why we decided that we needed to leave. But it's really just a matter of, if they want to show up and do the work of the people, which is addressing issues like natural disasters and flood relief. We just had a really tragic storm, and
Yeah.
lives were lost, children died, and we have not put any real intent and focus in that. We've had a number of sham hearings. There were 3 hearings in Houston, excuse me, 3 hearings across the state, that there were no maps even available for people to witness. And then Friday there was a hearing with a map that was, ridiculously drawn, because again, and I have to be, very clear about this, this is mid-decade redistricting. So this is not a normal order of business. This is not the every 10 year after the census map redrawn. And if you are aware, the current maps that we have now are under litigation because of just for a number of reasons, they're discriminatory. And so Republicans were fine with those maps then, but because they've gotten an order from Trump, now they're willing to, bring all of us back and focus on, drawing maps that don't matter. And so I think for us, I said this to a lot of people, it's one thing for our governor to come up with bad ideas. He has enough bad ideas on his own, but it's something totally different when, you're getting a request from the president that just doesn't impact Texans, right? It's not just our constituents that are in jeopardy. This has nationwide impacts. This, has the potential to, flip the legislature in a way that we've seen, where the big bad deal, for example, passed by 1 vote. And so what does that mean, not just for Texans, but people across America, to lose out on health care and access to resources because Donald Trump is giving an order and he knows that he's not going to be able to win. And he knows that 26 is a wash for him because people are not people are not happy with what's happening. And so it really feels like we're in a moment, in a crisis right now, because again, our people, not just in Texas, are in jeopardy, but across the country.
Well, and and trying to redraw the lines and take 5 seats there, that would mean that the African American community, you would have less than 20% representation in Texas, and I believe that the African American vote is about 45% or something like that in Texas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so,
and I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark. It
no,
out a little bit.
No, go right. I was asking about them taking, if they took 5, if they were successful at doing what they were doing and they took 5 additional seats, that means that the Democratic representation would be less than 20% when the Democratic voters are 45% of the electorate in Texas.
Absolutely. And what you've seen, and it's happens, this has happened before, where they crack and they pack districts, they split up cities and communities of interest, and they just further weaken the voices of people that are already marginalized. What we saw with Houston in these new maps is I have been moved into a totally different congressional district. I live in Congressional District 9. Congressman Al Green is my congressman. That is not the district that we saw on those maps anymore. And so we've been moved in Congressional District 18, and it feels in a lot of ways they have packed, Black Democrats into one district, further reducing our voice. And then just, went out of their way, in my opinion, to basically attack and retaliate against my congressman because he's been so vocally opposed to Trump's administration. And so, it's twofold. It's for them to be able to weaken and silence our voices and ensure that we're receiving even less than we deserve. But it's also a way to punish people and to punish, in my opinion, representatives who have given Donald Trump a really hard time and who have been willing to pull back the curtain on a lot of this nonsense.
Well, we certainly want to be in support of what you're doing, and we certainly appreciate it because, again, what you are doing is more than representing and standing up for Texas. This is what they are trying to do, and certainly using Texas as the test ground to be able to do this across the country. Now, I believe that we are at a point to where we can't, take the so-called high ground. We're going to have to fight this fire with fire. The old saying is, when you're faced with a bully, you punch him in the nose, and you'll back him up off of you.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have to do that in the states where we are here, which is largely a blue state. If they want to pull those kinds of strings there, we'll have to do it here, do it in California, which by and large would blow up in their face, because I think that we have more equity to be able to redraw lines and to take more seats than they can in these red states. So it will potentially blow up in their face.
Yeah, and I think that's why Trump was very strategic in choosing Texas, because we are such a large state. And I think he, in his mind, he thinks it's easier to manipulate the maps here and get his success and victory. But what I know about, Democrats across the country is we're paying attention, and we're not going to go down without a fight. I can almost assure you that as much as the Democratic governors do not want to, get in the mud and play these silly games with Donald Trump, that they're not going to stand idly by and watch the country that they know and love, be changed and further, weakened. So I absolutely anticipate that there will be retaliatory measures from some Democratic governors who are just going to not, take this land down. And, just to kind of, circle back here, I should have done this before. I really want to thank, the people of Illinois, the congressional Democrats here, the state elected Democrats, and Governor Pritzker for welcoming us with open arms and really being willing to step up and engage in this fight. Because, like you said, we have to punch. You said punch a bully in the nose. I believe in punching a bully right in his mouth, and I know for sure that when people are bullying, it's because they're weak. And so we're so much more stronger united. And this is one of those things where Texas is canary in the coal mine. We're ringing the alarm because we need folks to wake up and see what's happening.
Well, there's no question, and I have said and certainly know that and believe that this is really more than just about drawing lines and taking power. It really is also a race play. This is a man who hates Black people, and he certainly hates being challenged by Black people, and he has absolutely no conscience, and he has no shame to do it. So, and he will do it with the lights on. And I believe that the fight has to be taken to him rather than trying to play the high ground, because there is no high ground with this guy. You just have to, we're going to have to fight him with everything that we have in our arsenal to stop them from doing this. And, as far as them talking about Republicans capitulating, I don't believe that Republicans are capitulating. I believe that they're collaborating with this process. This is the guy that they have been looking for the longest to get to the top of the political food chain that will utter what they didn't have the courage to utter, and he's there, and they are in full support of that. I don't think it's capitulation. I think it's collaboration.
You know what? I believe it's both because we work alongside Republicans and the ones in the legislature, and there are some that are fully behind whatever Donald Trump does, 10 toes down. But there are others who will straight up tell you, "Hey, I know this is not a good thing. I know that this is gonna because it causes them grief." You got to remember, they're not building more Republican voters. What they're doing is they're moving people around, and so they're potentially setting themselves up to make some of these districts more competitive. And some of those Republicans are not in agreement with that. But as we saw with the vote that we took on school vouchers, even the Republicans who knew that their communities did not want it folded. And Donald Trump called them that morning on the phone. The governor had them in a room with Donald Trump on speakerphone, telling them to vote a certain way, or they were going to be primaries. So yeah, it's twofold. It's both. Some of them are absolutely ready. And you think about Nazi Germany. There are people that will say, what the line of "I was just following orders." That's what we're witnessing right now. There's a lot of people who are just too cowardly. And in my opinion, that's worse. That's worse.
Yeah, right, right. So what's the next step? You all are here, and you've got events going on here.
Mhm. Yeah, so we're still working. We've been meeting with, our Democratic delegation from across Illinois. We've been meeting with Democrat elected officials from other states. We're still representatives, so we're still doing the work, on behalf of our constituents. We're taking phone calls, we're doing, virtual town halls, still, servicing the needs of our constituents who are relying on us to represent them. And so it's the work does not stop. I'm a little bit exhausted.
Yeah,
I like a lot of my colleagues are missing our families, but this is what we signed up for, and we're in it for the long haul. So we're fighting, and standing 10 toes down, but we're also still remembering that we have a job to do, and we can't forget about our people back home.
all right, fantastic. I certainly want to thank you for coming on, State Representative Lauren Ashley Simmons. Thank you very much for taking the time to come onto the People Show. Please come back and keep us posted as to what's going on. And certainly we will continue to be supportive. And I believe ultimately that collectively we will win this fight.
Absolutely. We're in this together. We're righteous in our endeavors, and we're on the right side of this. So thank you so much, Mark, for what you do. Voices like yours are extremely important in making sure that the people understand what's at stake and what's important. So I appreciate you so much. And I can't wait to come back and give you some updates.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You
All right, people, look, this is where we are. And that's why it is important for all of us. We have got to stay engaged in this process because the equity for our community is seriously at risk. There are people, Donald Trump is interested in completely taking full power away from Black people. This is about race. We cannot be ignorant about what's going on. Now, they may try to couch it in other ways, but this is about race with this administration, and certainly he has his issues with our community and with our people, and certainly we have issues with him with all of his grotesqueness and the vile human being or less than human being that he is. Now, I know that there are some people who look like us that openly support what he is doing or quietly supporting. Either way, they reveal who they are, either in their ignorance, or some would say in their self-hate. But for the rest of us, we have to be supportive. And if you can, kick in $5, $10, $15 to support the effort, to support these legislators that are breaking quorum. And here they still are going to need resources. So you can support your local Democratic fundraisers to help with it. So again, if you can chip in $5, $10, please do that so that we can continue and they can continue to fight for democracy. Sometimes this is a very, very dirty business, and it's a dirty fight. And of course, Donald Trump has made it that more filthy. This is somebody who wallers in the mud like a kid who goes out to play, or like a pig in slop. He wallers in it, and he absolutely loves it. He is someone who wants to consolidate power, not for the purpose of doing anything good, but for the purpose of being able to go and beat himself on the chest that he had the wherewithal to make people to comply with whatever it is that he wanted it to be. No matter how destructive that it is, this is a person who has no clue, who doesn't care about having a clue about governance, who doesn't have a clue about process, who has no understanding of the importance of all of these career people whose job it is to make sure that the agenda of administrations are worked on and systems are put in place, but to continue to make sure that the country is moving, the country is safe and secure. And yet you have someone who is eroding at those foundations because of his will. I'm not going to say willful, but because of his ignorance. This is a person who talks about people having a low IQ. This is a person who literally probably is borderline special education of his level of intelligent quotient. This is a person who is as idiotic as they come. I mean, we've got some clips that can show you just the person who likes to talk about other people's cognitive ability. Let's take a look at his cognitive ability. Now, of course, they like to talk about Joe Biden, and then some of you fell right into that plane, but except Joe Biden has passed legislation that would have transformed the lives of millions of people, that this guy is trying to undo that work and trying to erase that history, not replace it with anything of any real substance or anything that is better, but just to erase it so that it doesn't go into effect. I mean, when in your lifetime have you ever heard anybody, for that matter, a president or any person, suggesting that they should get a Nobel Peace Prize? In your lifetime, we've never heard it before because it's never happened before. This terribly insecure, inept, completely incompetent, incapable of governing or managing anything, who is so devoid of any type of self-awareness or any type of self-confidence, that the only way that he makes himself feel good is by trying to badger somebody else. But it's not working. And his own antics, the Jeffrey Epstein antics, is coming back to bite him. And the only reason that it's coming back to bite him is because he's the one who fanned the flames. And now it's coming back to bite him. Some people call it a distraction. It's not a distraction. He's trying to distract. It's not a distraction. It's his call. He's the one who brought it out when other people were allowing for the process to take its course. He is the one who used it because he didn't have anything else of any substance to really talk about. So he wanted to pick something that he thought that he could put out as red meat to hold on to a group of people that never participated but became his strongest support. And now he is suggesting that he doesn't want to release the information, not because of him doing anything that may be illegal. That's not even the real thought. He is trying to protect his other cohorts from serious embarrassment from people finding out just how many creeps, along with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, extorting young girls and disrupting and destroying the lives of young girls for their sick, insecure, sexual, or I don't even know if you want to call it sexual, but they're sick desires that they would exploit and traffic human beings. That's what that is all about. He doesn't want for that to come out. Eventually, it's going to have to come out. And of course, he's going to be right in the thick of it. We all know that this guy is a creep. He put it out there as to what he thought he can do and could do because, he is or was or is famous, but that he can do and demoralize human beings because he's famous. So we already know, the level of lowness that he is. So there's nothing that's going to come out in that information that he's involved with that we're going to be surprised about. What we would be surprised about is if he was not involved at all. We would probably be surprised about that. But I seriously doubt that that is to be the case. But let's kind of go down a little bit of memory lane here and look at Donald Trump's cognitive ability, who talks about him taking the cognitive
We're going
test.
to make a question of We're going to make a question of cognitive ability. I think we should consider what happened in Alberta, Canada, just this week, where President Trump was at a press conference with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and said the following: "You all know the great PM of the UK, and we just signed a document." President Trump continued, "We just signed it, so we have our trade agreement with the EU. Britain has not been a party to the EU for 5 years." But President Trump made a statement which clearly was wrong. Now I'd like you to see a short video that includes some other examples of cognitive ability.
The people that came in, they're eating the cats. They're eating. I know about magnets is this. Give me a glass of water. Let me drop it on the magnets. That's the end of the magnet. The kidney has a very special place in the heart. Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? This is a tough hurricane. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. When you ran out the healthy arms, you ran out of really healthy. They had great arms, but they ran out. It's called sports. It's called baseball in particular. Maduro, Venezuela, it's unbelievable. Well, I don't know about it. I mean, obviously, I'm not involved.
This is the man who many of you are holding in such high esteem, and thought that this of what we have now, this destruction of what we have now, and the people who are going to be affected by this, the millions of people that if in fact we are not able to turn this around, if in fact they are able to cheat, to steal the election, as Republicans have done going all the way back, the last time that there was a legitimately elected Republican president was Dwight D. Eisenhower. That was the last legitimately elected Republican president. Every other Republican president, their campaigns had to cheat and manipulate to win the election. When Richard Nixon won the election, Richard Nixon, and this is even Lyndon Baines Johnson knew it. They had the information. It's of recording. I wish and you know what? I'm going to try to get that recording and play it, of the conversation that he had with his attorney general when they had the information where they had negotiated with the Viet Cong to end the war in Vietnam. They had already negotiated. And the Nixon campaign got in the middle and went and had the conversation and made the agreement with them. Don't end the war before the election. Don't end the war before the election. Richard Nixon's campaign did that. Nixon wins the election. Ronald Reagan, when Ronald Reagan won the election, Jimmy Carter, despite the debacle with the rescue of the Iran hostages, when Jimmy Carter had negotiated with Iran to return the hostages, the Reagan campaign said to them, went to them and told them, do not release the hostages until after the election. Before that, Jimmy Carter was leading in the polls. Despite any of the banter and all of the false information, please read the facts. Jimmy Carter was leading in the polls. The Reagan administration, or the Reagan campaign, went to Iran, and Iran agreed not to release the hostages. Ronald Reagan wins the election. Ronald Reagan won the election, not fair and square, but because they had to cheat. We have not had a legitimately elected Republican, fair and square president since Dwight Eisenhower. That was the last legitimate elected Republican president until or to that point. All of the presidents from that point, from Ronald Reagan to George W. Bush to George Herbert Walker Bush to and to the character that we have in office now. Dwight Eisenhower was the last legitimate elected president. Go check the record. But now, with all of that said, this too shall pass. And it is going to pass with the house of cards imploding on the cotton ball patch that sits on the top of Donald Trump's head. It is going to fall so hard on him. I don't know what the cabal and what it's going to be, but it will be. You cannot do evil and don't expect that you will reap what you sow. The very seeds that you sow, you're going to reap the harvest of those seeds that you sow. That is a principle that you cannot escape. No matter who you are, whatever you sow, you will reap. If you sow love, you're going to reap love. If you sow kindness, you're going to reap kindness. If you sow enmity, you're going to reap that. Whether you believe it or not, you will experience it. And when you are in positions of high authority and power, you have a greater responsibility. And being that you have a greater responsibility, you're going to pay a greater consequence. And Donald Trump will pay a greater consequence for the evil that he sows. And all of those sycophants and all of those so-called loyalists and capitulators and collaborators, they don't exercise any such thing as character, conscience, or courage. Because if you are a public servant, the name says it all. Your responsibility is to the public, not to a preferential person. And if you are serving in these public positions, your decisions that you make are not based on your collaboration with somebody else, unless you're collaborating about doing things that are in the best interest of the public. Now, this thing that they're trying to do in Texas is largely in the Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, Houston area, where the majority of the Black population lives. Now, Texas is 40% white. I'm sorry, 40% Latino. That's the majority population. It's 40% Latino, 39.8% white, 11.6% Black, 5% Asian, 1.5% Indian, and Hawaiian, 0.2%. But these are the areas where the African American community largely resides: Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, in those areas. And that's largely what they're trying to do. And they're trying to squeeze this so that there's only one Black representative. That's what they are. So don't tell me that this is not about race. This is purely about race. They may couch it into power, but it is about race. It's really about trying to turn the clock back even further, back to the days of Reconstruction. This is the whiteness that they are trying to reverse the clock back. Now, keep in mind that this week is the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. So if you want to kid yourself to think that this has nothing to do with race, then you go ahead and you do that. But this is about race. The 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, and they are pulling this move to try and gut the remainder of the Voting Rights Act without ever going to the Supreme Court, by doing what they're doing and trying to gerrymander the maps in Texas. Now, when you talk about Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump and this distraction and the sweetheart deal that they negotiated to take Ghislaine Maxwell, a sex predator, out of a maximum security and put them in a low-level security federal camp so that they can demonstrate that they're going to protect the abuser and put no priorities on the victims. This is where we are. But hey, this is what a lot of you voted for. 53% of white women, 39% of Hispanic men voted for this. %53% of white women say that this is better. So you know that this is about whiteness. If 53% of white women made this decision, and I think it was some 88% of white men thought that this was better. You know why they thought it was better? It had nothing to do with governing. Nothing to do with governing. These are people who would vote against their own interest in order to make sure that they were doing what they thought was protecting the white power structure. Even though it's a placebo for them, they would vote against their own interest because it's making them somehow feel that they are empowered. Even though they're poor, they're struggled, don't have any health insurance. I mean, if you go to some of these places like Arkansas, down in Mississippi, and some of these other places, and you go into these rural areas, these are poor white people who all voted for what we have now in this administration, even in their local areas. They would vote for people who do not care about them. Sarah Huckabee Sanders excuse me, they voted for her. She decided to send $44 million of their dollars to Israel. In some parts of Arkansas that they don't have access to cellular service. If you are in some parts of the rural parts of Arkansas, you would have to drive 2 or 3 hours before you could get cellular service. And in many of those areas, they don't even have roads. They have roads, but they have gravel, rock roads. And they still vote for these same people. They wouldn't vote for the black man in Arkansas. And they voted against their interests, and they voted for Sarah Huckabee Sanders. This is what it is. Donald Trump fires the BLS commissioner because numbers came out, the jobs report came out with the numbers. Now, these are statisticians, statistical people who gather this information from more than 600,000 sources to be able to determine what the job market is delivering through multiple layers of calling and getting information, finding out who's working, how much they're earning, who's not working. More than 600,000 sources. And so, because these numbers came out, now Donald Trump says that the numbers are rigged, just like he said that the numbers were rigged during the election, which was clearly off because they were off by 800,000. But that number came out in August before the election. Before the election, those numbers came out, and he wanted to say that the numbers were rigged because they wanted to make him look bad. Donald Trump doesn't need any help whatsoever from anybody making him look bad, period. He does a stellar job of that all by himself. The man can't even play a game of golf above board. They caught him when he was out there in Scotland with his caddy. He knocks the ball in the pond, and they caught his caddy dropping a ball. And Donald Trump didn't say to him, "No, you can't do that." Donald Trump got his club and just continued to play as though nothing had happened. But of course, it got caught on tape. But that is indicative of Donald Trump. All right, listen, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the People's Show. Don't forget to please text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385. Text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385. We are continuing to organize, to build our own Black independent voting bloc. It is important. It is important that we strengthen our voice. I had conversations with people this past week out at Cole Park where they honored and we celebrated the 88th birthday of the former United States Senator, the former Lieutenant Governor, the former Attorney General of the state of Illinois, and that is Roland Burris. who turned 88 years of age on yesterday, and they celebrated him out at Cole Park on 85th and King Drive on Saturday. But I had the opportunity to talk with some people there about what we are doing. People are excited. They're joining, and they're going to be with us on Thursday night. So I want to ask you all, if you're already in the text alert, join the Zoom meeting on Thursday night at 6:30. So text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385, and let's build and organize our very own powerful, independent Black voting bloc right here in Chicago, Cook County, in the state of Illinois. That's going to do it for this week's edition of The People Show on intellectualradio.com, iHeartRadio, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We'll see you next week.